Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. I'm a 33-year-old man, leading a peaceful life with my wife and two kids. Our cozy house nestled in a friendly neighborhood seemed like a haven, but one neighbor cast a shadow over our happiness. John, a middle-aged man next door, had harbored an inexplicable animosity toward us since the day we moved in. Speculations about his jealousy and bitterness consumed my thoughts, for he seemed to despise his own wife and lack the joy of parenthood. Constantly prying and meddling, he intruded into our lives whenever he could. One summer afternoon, our kids were playing in our backyard, their innocent laughter filling the air. As fate would have it, their soccer ball sailed into John's yard, threatening to ignite another confrontation. Reluctantly, we let our children retrieve it, hoping for a peaceful resolution. But John, true to form, stormed out, berating them and questioning their upbringing. Alarmed, I intervened, urging my boys to head inside while I faced the venomous neighbor. Engaging in a futile apology, I requested the ball's return, seeking an end to the tense situation. Stubbornly, he refused, summoning the non-emergency police line to accuse my children of causing property damage. Frustration welled up within me as his wife, exasperated by his behavior, tossed the ball back to me, her face reddened with embarrassment. With his shouts trailing behind, I retreated to the safety of my own home, hoping for a respite from John's spite. For a while, we managed to avoid him, keeping our distance and seeking harmony within our community. Witnessing the increasing number of Ring doorbells in our neighborhood, we decided to fortify our own security. It became clear that vigilance was paramount when it came to protecting our precious children. Days passed without incident, until one fateful day when I received a notification on my phone indicating a visitor at our front door. John. Concerned, I alerted my wife, hoping she could monitor the situation through our cameras while I remained vigilant. I must mention that I possessed a shotgun solely for the purpose of self-defense. Stored securely and separate from its ammunition, it symbolized my commitment to safeguard my family. Until that night, I had never considered its practical use beyond visits to the shooting range. However, the events that unfolded would test my readiness to protect my loved ones. After a pleasant evening, my wife and I retired to bed, enveloped by the serenity of the night. Yet around 2 hours later, the sounds of shuffling downstairs jolted me from my slumber. I roused my wife, instructing her to take our children to their room and lock the door. Laden with a mix of trepidation and determination, I retrieved my shotgun, loaded it cautiously, and stealthily descended the stairs. The house cloaked in darkness, a solitary beam of light emanated from the kitchen, illuminating the figure of an intruder. Heart pounding, I trained my weapon on the individual and switched on the lights. To my shock, it was none other than John, rummaging through our cabinets, driven by some insidious compulsion. I confronted him, demanding to know why he had invaded my home. His slurred, incoherent excuses echoed through the kitchen, revealing the telltale signs of intoxication. I glanced towards the living room, observing the open window that granted him access. Refusing to yield, John brazenly proposed that I allow him to rob our house, exploiting the cover of our slumber. Appalled, I firmly rejected his outrageous request. Seizing upon this confrontation, he dialed cops, painting me as the aggressor in a desperate attempt to avoid the consequences of his actions. As we awaited the arrival of the police, my wife joined me downstairs, reassured by the distant wail of sirens that signified safety. My neighbor persisted in his deluded accusations, but I stood resolute, providing the authorities with a truthful account of events. They turned their scrutiny towards John, unraveling the sordid truth of his midnight intrusion. It became apparent that John's motives extended beyond mere theft. He sought to instill fear within us, a calculated ploy to drive us away from our cherished home. The officers questioned his audacious actions, unearthing his twisted plan to sow chaos and paranoia. I had become the target of his vendetta, a pawn in his misguided quest for control. Empowered by our shared account, the police offered me the opportunity to press charges, and I seized it without hesitation. As John was escorted outside to face the consequences of his trespasses, his wife, burdened by the weight of his actions, engaged in a conversation with the officers. We were left with an unwavering commitment to our safety, bolstering our defenses with additional security measures. The knowledge that John's actions stemmed from alcoholism added a layer of complexity to this harrowing ordeal. I couldn't help but feel empathy for his wife, who eventually made the courageous decision to file for divorce, seeking refuge from her toxic marriage. The next one is a pro-revenge story. When finishing up my degree in criminal justice, we had to learn about how the justice system works and how sometimes it doesn't. For about 2 weeks, we studied a case from the early 90s of a woman who had killed her husband. Because the case is public record and a very interesting read, look up Betty Freeburg, 1993. The setting was a small town in Iowa, and the husband was the town drunk. Everyone in town knew him as a drunk, a brawler, a womanizer, and overall just a bad person. His wife was the stay-at-home mom, as she wasn't allowed to work or leave the house aside from getting groceries. He would go home, beat her, and violate her sexually, and the cycle would go on, and the whole town knew. Neighbors were a quarter-mile down the road, but still would call the police when they heard noises. It was well documented, and because he was never a threat to their daughter, the police did nothing aside from taking him to jail like a revolving door. Each time he got out, he'd beat her up again. Their daughter was away at college but came home for Thanksgiving. While the father was at work, the daughter told the mother that her father had violated her sexually, and that she had even had an abortion because of it. This was the breaking point for the mother. She got her revenge 100-fold. When the daughter went back to school after the holidays and the husband came home, she killed him with his gun at the kitchen table. The table is important because it was a big farm table used for chopping up deer and other livestock. Doing the butchering was her job, and she was good at it. If I could find the case report, it has pictures of the table and clear marks of chopping. She chopped up her husband and scattered his body over neighboring farms, fed what she could to her livestock, and cleaned up. Months went by, and winter came and left. Police investigating his disappearance even questioned her while sitting at the table drinking coffee. She explained the marks on the table by explaining that she butchered her own meat and showed the officers her deep freeze. The investigation went on for months until finally, a neighbor's dog brought back a body part. They identified it as belonging to him, and she was arrested on the spot. She pleaded not guilty and refused any offers. It went to trial, and 12 of her peers judged her not guilty due to extenuating circumstances. She confessed to the crime, explained why she did it and how, and that she had no real choice because no one was going to help her. The farm was hers, and she refused to give it up as it had been her family's home. She was let go entirely for the murder charge. The next week we had Betty as a speaker in class to discuss the case, and she was awesome. At the time, she ironically sold dismemberment insurance for Aflac. Betty, if you ever read this, know you're seen as a figurehead for battered women, and you pulled off the best revenge I have ever been able to study. The next one is a petty revenge story. I recently bought a house and have been having some work done before I move in. It was empty on the market for about 6 or 8 months before I bought it. One morning I got a call from my contractor asking me about moving the cars in the driveway, and of course I had no idea what he was talking about. I hadn't moved in yet. I left my job site and drove nearly half an hour to get there. As soon as I arrived, the people on the east side of me were walking toward the cars. I asked if they were their cars, and they said yes. They told me that they had been parking there for a few months with permission from the owners. I informed them that I was the new owner and they can't park there any longer. We went back and forth, and with the intention of being a good neighbor and trying to show some goodwill, I agreed to allow them to park there for a few more weeks until I move in, with the agreement that they would move them by 6 a.m. every morning. The rest of the week went by without incident. The contractor called me about scheduling a walkthrough on Saturday, and we set a time for early afternoon. When I arrived, there were 4 cars in the driveway and nowhere to park. The only on-street parking is 2 blocks away. I called them and asked them to move their vehicles, reminding them of our agreement. After 20 minutes, they finally came out and moved them. Speaking with them, they claimed to have misunderstood and thought our agreement only referred to weekdays and not weekends. I corrected them and moved on. Sunday morning, I grabbed a trailer and loaded some furniture to take over and store in the garage. Once again, there were cars in the driveway. I called them and got VM. I texted and said they had until a tow truck could arrive to get them moved. No answer. I called a tow company. 45 minutes later, 2 tow trucks showed up, backed in, and hooked up to the cars. All of a sudden, the neighbors were home. They ran out to stop their cars from being towed, and it ended up costing them a little over $300 to get them unhooked. I called my contractor and asked if he knew someone who could put in a driveway gate, and he did. I let the neighbors know that they could no longer use my driveway. On Wednesday, I got a call from the gate installer, telling me that there were cars in the driveway. I called them and said tow trucks were on the way. They moved, The gate was installed, and I went by to pick up the opener that evening. The neighbor's husband came out to confront me, and I opted to just call the PD and deal with it legally. That Saturday, I went by to accept an outdoor furniture delivery and check on things when I noticed a towel beside the pool and a small kid's flotation device. My initial thought was that I just hadn't noticed them before, so I wrote it off and threw them both in the trash. On Saturday, the movers arrived with everything, and we began moving things in. Around 7 p.m., my daughter and I left to go grab some dinner, arriving back at the house around 9:30 p.m. The neighbors were in my pool. They were hanging out and using my furniture. When I opened the door and began raising hell, they told the kids to go to the house, and the children ran to a corner of our fence and just walked through. They had cut out the privacy fence so it could be removed and had been using the pool at their leisure for who knows how long. Again, I called the police and filed a complaint. The dad was arrested for trespassing, DPP, and an outstanding warrant, and the oldest boy, 20M, for an outstanding warrant. I replaced the fence with a new one because they had destroyed the posts, runners, and pickets by removing and reinstalling the panel. Small Claims awarded me the total cost of 83 of 8 privacy fence, which came out to $3,800. The following Monday morning around 5 a.m., their cars were parked in the street, where there's no street parking, so I made a phone call. They were gone when I left at 7 a.m. I haven't been paid yet, but I did notice a for rent sign in their yard this morning, so that's just as good. Good riddance. Edit update. 1. Security system was installed that next week, along with 6 cameras around the house, a Ring doorbell, and a fence around the pool itself to keep the dogs and my grandson out of it. I'll be closing and covering the pool in the next few weeks. 2. I met the owner of the house yesterday evening. The house will be empty by the end of the week. They were evicted for non-payment of rent, likely due to tow charges, and the husband not working because he was incarcerated, where he remains. The warrant was for back child support. The wife apologized and claimed that she was told they had permission to use the pool. They didn't. 3. The material for the fence was purchased through my company account. I'm a structural engineer and commercial construction manager for a large local GC. Only 2 posts had to be replaced and a handful of runners. The rest was just 8 1-inch x 6 inches, 1/2 inches pressure-treated pickets, which cost me $2.60 per stick, multiplied by 210 pickets purchased. The rest was labor and fasteners. So altogether, about $900 for material and stain, $150 for a dumpster, and the rest went toward labor to finish it on a weekend. Fun fact, I'm also a property investor flipper. I've been in construction, commercial, civil, industrial, and residential for 35 years. Not my first fence, nor my first a-hole neighbor. Before the paint experts jump on board, I know how long I have to wait before pressure washing and staining the fence. 4. The petty was only my twisting the knife by having their cars towed from the street when they weren't affecting me at all. The next one is an entitled people story. One day my father, my cousin, and I were at a gardening store to buy some pieces to repair a sprinkler system. They were small items. We found what we needed, but one of them had the tag scratched and wouldn't scan at the checkout. I said we had to find one with a proper tag, but my father said there was no need. He took the tag off and put the item in his pocket. My cousin and I looked at each other like, what the heck? When we asked my father, he said they wouldn't even notice. Since it had no tag, it wouldn't activate the alarm at the entrance. 2 things you need to know going forward. My cousin is a police officer fresh out of the academy. My father has always had an attitude of superiority towards the children of the family. Something like, I'm your father / uncle / etc. You won't dare cross me. No matter if we're already adults with jobs and our own homes. So my cousin asked if my father realized he could have him arrested for this, to which he responded by laughing and then dared him to do it. We walked towards the registers, and while waiting in line, my cousin whispered in my ear, "You know what I'm about to do, right?" To which I replied, "Yes." He waited for my father to pay for the stuff he wanted to buy and pass the alarm sensors so that the theft would be official and not just intent. Then he started acting like a police officer. He identified himself as an off-duty police officer, mentioning his badge number, etc., loudly and clearly so that people would hear. Then he asked my dad to empty his pockets. My dad had a puzzled look on his face at this point. Security came to check what was going on, and my cousin explained that he, as an off-duty officer, had witnessed this man putting an object in his pocket and not paying for it. Security also asked my dad to empty his pockets, and there it was, the item he had stolen. Security detained my dad and called cops. Police officers arrived and took my dad away after confirming the story with the security footage. He spent the night in jail and was fined. After that, he stopped acting like the king of the family's hill, and this became something to laugh about for years to come. The next one is an entitled parents story. Well, I think it's fairly safe to assume I've lost a couple of friends over this, but it wasn't me who did it. This weekend, a friend of mine asked me to keep an eye on her two kids while she and her hubby went away for the weekend for some couple time. Her mother was initially going to watch the kids but fell through on short notice. She called me at 3 p.m. on Friday to come over in 3 hours, and my friend knew I probably wasn't doing anything, which was both hurtful and accurate. I said sure. She's got two kids, a girl who is 8 and a boy who is 5. They're good kids for the most part. The boy has a little bit of a snitching problem and the girl has a sharing problem, but it's 2 days. So I show up Friday after work while my friend gives me the rundown, and her husband tells the kids he will beat them with their sibling if they're bad. The kids were unimpressed. The parents leave, and it's just me and the kids in the house, and it's immediate pandemonium. The brother snitches on his sister for taking an extra cookie. The sister cries to me that her brother touched her switch, and I make the executive decision that they've got too much energy, and if they're tuckered out, they'll hopefully chill. So I ask the kids to track down bathing suits because we're going to my gym, which has a pool and a guest policy. I did let Mom know what we were up to before we left and asked if it was okay if I brought my dog over. He doesn't shed and is house trained. She said that was fine. Operation Pool was a great success, though the locker room got a bit dicey. That's a whole other story. Once everyone was appropriately tired, including me, we made a pit stop on the way back to their house to grab my pooch. He's extremely well behaved and loves kids, and both kids were immediately all about Dexter, and Dexter was all about the kids. Ground rules, no pulling on his fur, and he goes where he wants. Kids kind of struggle with the notion that a dog is not a toy. I obviously kept him out of places where he wasn't supposed to go, but I'm a grown-up, allegedly. Miraculously, after the swim and chasing the dog around the house, left the kids too pooped to pop, and both fell asleep watching a Disney film on the TV. After the movie, I woke the kids up to trot off to bed and didn't make them brush their teeth. For the record, the son did indeed yeet me under a bus when Mommy called in the morning. I told the kiddos that if they left their doors open, Dexter might sneak in and give them cuddles. I increased the likelihood of this by sleeping on the couch and not leaving him a spot. He expressed his displeasure with me by flouncing off and going into the boys' room to sleep. Great success. Saturday, we went for a hike in the morning, had a nap, and then played ball with the dog and generally had a pretty chill day. Diffused the sharing issue by explaining to the girl that the pup has feelings and wants just like any person, and she can't control him that way. She appeared thoughtful, and then immediately started yelling at her brother for hogging the dog again. At least she wasn't mad at the dog. I successfully heated up the casserole Mom had left me for dinner, following her carefully laid out instructions, admonished the kids to not give him people food, and was soundly ignored. I did draw the line at a couple of morsels from each kid and put my foot down. More than that, and he's gonna get the runs, and nobody wants that. That night, I made sure Sis got a turn by again, hogging the couch and also closing the boy's door since he got a turn already. The girl was smug. The boy made me call his mom. Mom wasn't happy that my dog was in her kids' beds. I reminded her that he doesn't shed and can't smell worse than the kids, and her daughter might burn the house down with us inside if she doesn't get a turn. Mom accepted defeat. Saturday night was again relatively peaceful, though toothbrushing did happen. Early Sunday morning, I got woken up by having my dog step on my testicles, which is a thing he's really good at, and he was mad at me for not leaving any room. I made room. Apparently, the girl tried to do something he didn't like, and he noped out of there. She wasn't happy about that, but was appeased by my pain enough to go back to bed. This morning was relatively chill, some more playing with the dog and some team tug of war, and Mom and Dad got back around lunchtime and thanked me for keeping their kids in one piece. The kids said bye to the pup, and there were tears, and I loaded up myself and my dog and went back home to enjoy the relative peace and quiet. Yeah, I wish it ended there. Maybe an hour after we got home, I get a phone call from a very frazzled-sounding mom with kids crying in the background. She says they need my dog now. I'm sorry, what? You don't need a dog, you need my dog? Like I don't need to come back and visit soon? You just want him? Well, the kids got so attached and they won't stop crying about missing the dog, and her husband don't have time for 2 kids and a puppy, and more guilt-inducing word vomit that was having precisely 0 effect on me. Abso-fluffing-lutely not. Click. Still getting texts about being reasonable and you have time to train a new dog. 48 hours of free babysitting isn't enough? You want my dog too? Not in this lifetime. The next one is an entitled parent story. So basically, I, 15F, and my ex, 15M, broke up a little over a month ago. In the first couple of weeks, my friends were comforting me. For some background, he was manipulative and forced me to do things I didn't want to do, like sending photos, etc. It took me over 2 months to finally break up with him. As I said before, in the first couple of weeks after the breakup, I was just being comforted. Then after that, his mother started sending me harassing messages and voicemails. It was mild at first. I never answered their calls because I was scared of his mother. Her son was one of those boys who always acted differently in front of certain people, and I was stupid enough to not see that this was a very red flag. Anyway, his mother obviously thinks he is an angel sent from heaven who can do no wrong, so when I told her about what he did to me, she lost her head. She started spam calling and spam texting me. As a teenager, I was very afraid, so I shut my phone off and decided to just leave it for a bit and hope things would die down. The next morning, when I checked my phone, I had 100 plus text messages and 35 missed calls. I checked through all of them. The texts were, of course, typical, "How dare you? My child is an angel. He would never do that to anyone," cursing me out and all that stuff. But the voicemails were more vulgar. She said that she was going to find where I lived and hurt me. In one of the voicemails, I will never forget what she said. "You, young lady, are a very spoiled brat. You are just sad that you can't get my son to send to you, so you're making all of these lies and fibs up so that you can gain some sort of dominance. You will never, and I mean never, have any man in your life ever again because of this. I hope that you end up lonely and miserable because that is all you ever will be." And then it ended with some rustling and muffled yelling before it beeped. But at that point, I was having a panic attack and couldn't breathe. That was a couple of days ago. Of course, he hasn't and won't tell his mother the truth so he can keep his angelic image. But lately, he has been texting me and saying that I should drop all of this because his mother won't stop yelling at him to call me or text me. My friends tell me that I shouldn't because I'm not in the wrong, but I think I am. So am I the a-hole? Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.